Here's a thought that will disturb you. The most innocent-looking creatures in nature documentaries, those little meerkats standing tall in the desert sun, are in fact blood-soaked killers. 1 in every 5 meerkats will die at the hands of its own kind, a murder rate of 20%. That's 10 times higher than humans. Let that sink in. Those furry animals used to sell car insurance are statistically more murderous than us. And yet, if you flip through human history, it feels like a continuous bloodbath: wars, massacres, genocides, betrayals written in crimson ink across every continent. How can both of these things be true? If cavemen weren't born killers, then why does our past look like a crime scene? The truth is far stranger, far darker, and ultimately far more hopeful than you'd expect. What we inherited through evolution is not a curse, but a choice: a capacity to kill, yes, but also the unique power to restrain, to redirect, and to reinvent ourselves. But don't get comfortable yet, because before we find the hope, we need to walk through the shadows, and the shadows start millions of years before you or I ever existed. It begins with the numbers, cold and clinical, yet haunting in what they reveal. Researchers who combed through over 1,000 mammal species discovered something chilling. Violence isn't evenly distributed in the animal kingdom. It follows a pattern, a lineage. Humans, for all our bloody chronicles, are exactly as murderous as our evolutionary cousins predicted. Not saints, not demons, just primates, with a baseline of about 2% lethal violence. The same figure you'd find in gorillas, orangutans, and chimps. Yet here's the twist. While some mammal species kill at staggering rates, meerkats at 20%, ground squirrels at levels that make medieval warlords blush, even deer and lemurs steeped in unexpected bloodshed, humans have always floated somewhere in the middle, predictable, ordinary. Except we are anything but ordinary. Because unlike those other mammals, we learned to turn the dial. Culture became our weapon and our shield, letting us suppress murder almost to zero, or amplify it until entire tribes vanished from the earth. One group in Ecuador once reached homicide rates of nearly 25%, while others, like the Semi of Malaysia, lived virtually free of murder. Same species, same DNA, wildly different fates. Why? That's the question that haunted scientists and archaeologists, leading them into caves where skulls carried secrets of blows to the head, into lakeside massacre sites that still echo with screams 10,000 years gone, into jungles where chimps wage wars and bonobos make love. Stay with me, because in a moment I'll take you inside one of the most chilling prehistoric murder scenes ever discovered. A crime committed almost 500,000 years ago, long before Homo sapiens even walked the earth. And it will force you to reconsider what it really means to be human. Deep beneath the earth in northern Spain, archaeologists uncovered a site so eerie it still unsettles the most hardened researchers. Cima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. At first glance, it looked like a natural tomb, a vertical shaft, filled with nearly 30 ancient skeletons dating back 430,000 years, long before our species, Homo sapiens, even emerged. But one skull stopped the world cold. It bore 2 neat, deliberate holes punched straight through the forehead, each blow striking almost the same spot with chilling precision. This wasn't a fall, wasn't an accident, wasn't the work of a predator. It was the unmistakable signature of murder. Someone, nearly 500,000 years ago, raised a weapon, perhaps a sharpened wooden spear or a stone axe, and struck another human relative twice in the head with calculated, lethal intent. The victim wasn't even one of us, but a member of Homo heidelbergensis, an earlier branch of our evolutionary tree. Think about that for a moment. Murder existed before language as we know it, before art, before the very concept of culture. It is older than storytelling itself. Yet the story didn't end with violence. Because when researchers examined the rest of the pit, a startling contrast emerged. Most of the bodies had not been thrown away like garbage. They had been carefully placed, arranged in ways that suggested ritual or reverence. Some even appeared to have been buried with what could only be called offerings. Among them was a magnificent hand axe of pink quartzite, so finely crafted and so utterly useless for daily survival that archaeologists nicknamed it Excalibur. Why would anyone sacrifice a precious tool by laying it beside the dead, unless they believed the dead had use for it elsewhere? In the same dark chamber, then lies evidence of humanity's oldest contradiction: the capacity for cruelty and the capacity for compassion. Murder and mourning entombed together in stone. Imagine the scene reconstructed: one individual singled out, beaten twice in the forehead until life fled, the body dumped into a pit, the act covered up, and yet surrounding them, others laid gently to rest, honored as if death did not erase their worth. This paradox echoes through every age that followed. Even before we were fully human, we were torn between destruction and devotion. And it raises a question that will haunt the rest of our journey: were we destined to kill, or destined to care? Perhaps both. Stay tuned, because the next discovery doesn't just whisper about individual murder, it screams about organized slaughter. 10,000 years ago, by the shores of a lake in Kenya, archaeologists unearthed a massacre site so brutal that it rewrote everything we thought we knew about the birth of war. And what they found there makes Cima de los Suezos look like the prologue to a much darker story. On the parched shoreline of Lake Turkana in Kenya, a haunting silence cloaks a place where 10,000 years ago, screams once echoed, where an entire community was wiped out in a storm of violence so calculated, it still chills archaeologists to the bone. The site is called Nataruk, and it holds 27 skeletons frozen in their final moments. Men, women, children, even one woman in late pregnancy. Their bodies tell a story more brutal than any myth, because this is not legend, it is evidence. Skulls crushed by clubs, ribs shattered, stone projectile points still embedded where they pierced flesh, knees smashed while victims knelt. Some had wrists bound with cord before death proof, not of a sudden fight, but of deliberate execution. This was not random violence, not a drunken brawl of prehistory. This was a massacre. One man still carried an obsidian blade lodged in his skull, a blade traced back to sources far away, suggesting that the attackers traveled long distances for this raid. A child's bones showed tiny defensive wounds on its arms, hands raised in vain to block the killing blows. And perhaps most haunting of all, the pregnant woman, her body tied, her unborn child silenced in the womb by cruelty that needs no embellishment. For decades, anthropologists comforted themselves with the tidy theory that war was born alongside agriculture. After all, why would hunter-gatherers who roamed vast territories with little to defend ever need to slaughter each other? Farming, villages, granaries, livestock, those seemed like the reasons men began to fight in organized ways. But Nataruk shattered that illusion. These victims had no farms, no houses, no granaries to protect. They lived lightly, carrying only what they could, yet they were targeted, exterminated, discarded without burial. Why? One answer lies in the geography. Nataruk sat at a bottleneck where fresh water and fish were abundant. A rare oasis in an unforgiving land. To control it meant survival. Another answer lies in human behavior itself, because, unlike animals bound by instinct, we calculate, we plan. And when resources are scarce, we sometimes decide that the survival of our group justifies the annihilation of another. But here's the twist: Nataruk is so famous not because it was common, but because it was rare. For every site like this, there are countless others where hunter-gatherers lived and died without signs of large-scale killing. The capacity for atrocity was present, encoded in our behavioral blueprint like... Here's a thought that will disturb you. The most innocent-looking creatures in nature documentaries, those little meerkats standing tall in the desert sun, are in fact blood-soaked killers. 1 in every 5 meerkats will die at the hands of its own kind, a murder rate of 20%. That's 10 times higher than humans. Let that sink in. Those furry animals used to sell car insurance are statistically more murderous than us. And yet, if you flip through human history, it feels like a continuous bloodbath: wars, massacres, genocides, betrayals written in crimson ink across every continent. How can both of these things be true? If cavemen weren't born killers, then why does our past look like a crime scene? The truth is far stranger, far darker, and ultimately far more hopeful than you'd expect. What we inherited through evolution is not a curse, but a choice, a capacity to kill, yes, but also the unique power to restrain, to redirect, and to reinvent ourselves. But don't get comfortable yet, because before we find the hope, we need to walk through the shadows. And the shadows start millions of years before you or I ever existed. A dormant virus, but it needed trigger: scarcity, fear, rivalry to awaken. And that brings us to an unsettling mirror. To truly understand ourselves, scientists turned not just to fossils of the dead, but to the living shadows of our past. Our closest cousins still walking the forests of Africa. One cousin wages coordinated wars, patrols borders, kills infants, and erases rival groups with chilling efficiency. The other builds societies where conflict dissolves into play, food sharing, and sex. Both are 99.6% identical to us. The real question is, which cousin reflects who we truly are? Stay with me, because what happens next takes us deep into the jungles of Africa, where Jane Goodall once watched a 4-year war unfold among chimpanzees, and where bonobos, just across a river, rewrote the script with peace. 2 evolutionary experiments, 2 ways of being, one drenched in blood, the other in affection. And hidden between them is the truth of our own violent inheritance. In the dense jungles of Africa, where sunlight filters through canopies older than our own species, 2 of our closest relatives live out lives that seem to contradict everything we think we know about nature. Watch the chimpanzee for long enough and you see something chillingly familiar. Males forming coalitions, patrolling invisible borders in silence, slipping through the undergrowth with a precision that looks less like instinct and more like strategy. When they find an isolated rival, the attack is swift and merciless. Bodies beaten to death, infants torn from mothers, sometimes eaten, other times simply destroyed to erase a bloodline. Roughly 4 to 5% of chimpanzees die this way, at the hands of their own kind, double our evolutionary baseline. Jane Goodall, who first observed this in the forests of Gombe, was devastated. She had thought chimps were gentler than us, only to watch them launch a 4-year war that wiped an entire community off the map. Every adult male of the Kahama group slaughtered, and yet, just across the Congo River, another species so genetically similar they could almost be mistaken for chimp stells, a different story altogether. Bonobos share the same strength, the same intelligence, the same potential for violence, and yet their murder rate is virtually non-existent. Decades of observation have documented almost no lethal aggression. When conflict sparks, bonobos disarm it not with fists, but with food sharing, play, and, most famously, sex. Where chimps patrol their borders with paranoia, bonobos greet strangers with orgies that dissolve tension before it curdles into violence. One cousin follows Hobbes, where life is nasty, brutish, and short. The other follows something closer to Lenin: make love, not war. The difference isn't genetic destiny, it's ecological and social. Chimps live in male-dominated hierarchies, where status is earned through aggression, in territories where scarce fruit fuels competition. Bonobos live in female-led societies where alliances of older females keep males in check. In forests where food is abundant enough that cooperation beats competition. As primatologist Frans de Waal once put it, chimps solve sexual issues through power. Bonobos solve power issues through sex. Both strategies work, both mirror different versions of ourselves. Because when you look at them side by side, you're staring at 2 possible human natures: warrior and peacemaker, conqueror and lover, and realizing we carry both within us. All that separates them is a river, the Congo, which formed about 2 million years ago and split one ancestral population in 2. One side grew into tacticians of war, the other into masters of harmony. If a river can sculpt such radical destinies, what might human culture be capable of? Here's where the real puzzle emerges. If violence delivers food, mates, and territory, if it offers clear evolutionary rewards, Why didn't humans evolve to be even more violent than chimps? Why do we, unlike them, often choose peace when war might pay better? The answer is shocking, and it's buried in the most unsettling theory of all that humans tamed themselves by killing the killers. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't myth, it's science, and it explains how we transformed from potential predators into something entirely new. Imagine a firelit camp, tens of thousands of years ago. One man larger, crueler, has ruled by fear, stealing food, beating rivals, maybe even killing. In most animals, the alpha stays on top. But in humans, something radical happened. The others, smaller but united, rose against him. A stone, a spear, a silent packhand, the tyrant was gone. This wasn't a one-time rebellion. Anthropologists believe it happened again and again, across countless bands, shaping us in ways as deep as our bones. This is the self-domestication hypothesis. Humans executed the most violent among them, pruning aggression out of the species. Over time, those who thrived weren't the strongest, but the most cooperative, the ones who could keep allies rather than terrorize them. Slowly, our bodies changed to softer faces, smaller jaw signs of domestication, just like wolves turned into dogs. The effect was profound. Unlike chimps, whose alphas reigned by force, human leaders had to persuade, charm, or risk being overthrown. Violence didn't vanish, but it narrowed. We still fight, but we also trust, trade, and build communities larger than nature should allow. That trick, killing the killers, may be the reason we aren't far more murderous than we are. But here's the twist: the same cooperation that protected us also gave us armies, empires, and wars beyond imagination. We tamed violence only to scale it up. And as societies grew, execution by campfire turned into execution by kings, priests, and states. Which raises the question: if our biology curbed violence, why does history look drenched in blood? The answer lies in civilization itself, in the grand tapestry of life, where moments weave themselves into threads of fate. The journey of our heroes stands as a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human heart. They walked paths strewn with obstacles, where each step was a battle against despair, and every turn of the road seemed to whisper doubt and uncertainty. The mountains they faced loomed like ancient sentinels, testing the strength of their resolve, while rivers surged with relentless fury, threatening to sweep away all that they held dear. Yet even in the midst of chaos, they pressed forward. Not with the certainty of victory, but with the unwavering courage that comes from knowing that every effort, however small, shapes the world around them. Their journey was not one of mere triumph over physical challenges, but of mastery over the self, the taming of fear, the conquering of hesitation, the awakening of potential hidden deep within their souls. Every failure became a lesson, every setback a stepping stone, and every moment of doubt an opportunity to rise stronger. Through nights heavy with shadow and days drenched in relentless heat, they discovered that true strength lies not in dominance over others, but in the perseverance that drives one to keep moving forward. No matter how insurmountable the odds may appear, as they journeyed together, they learned the profound truth that unity and trust are forces more powerful than any weapon. Where one faltered, another lifted. Where one doubted, another encouraged. Bonds forged in the crucible of struggle became unbreakable. And their shared victories, however small, became symbols of hope, not only for themselves, but for all who witnessed their courage. Each challenge they overcame echoed far beyond the path they traveled, resonating in the hearts of those who dared to dream, inspiring generations to rise above their limitations and embrace the unknown with courage. In the end, their triumph was not measured solely by the obstacles they conquered or the foes they defeated, but by the transformation that occurred within them. They emerged wiser, braver, and more compassionate, carrying forward a legacy that would outlast the fleeting shadow of their mortal lives. Their story reminds us that life's true victories are often invisible, residing not in trophies or accolades, but in the quiet strength to endure, the courage to act despite fear, and the wisdom to grow through every challenge. Thus, as the sun set on their long and arduous journey, It illuminated not just the landscape of their accomplishments, but the boundless potential within every human heart. Theirs was a story of perseverance, of hope, and of courage. Eternal a reminder that even in the darkest valleys, one can rise, and in the fiercest storms, one can shine. Their journey was monumental, their spirit unyielding, and their legacy truly giant.